Hi y'all, Freeze Cracked here. Hey, I haven't done a video in a long time for various reasons. And so I thought that I would just nap, because when I haven't done a video for a long time and I can't remember all the things I've gone over, and I haven't learned a bunch of new things, might just pay just a nap. Kind of a difficult shape, you know, lots of thickness, not a lot of width, and chalky cortex on it. Central Texas quarry rock. You got to get into it first to get the chalk off somewhere. And you can do that several places if you want. And start, you know, from multiple locations if you choose. And, you know, there's a lot of nappers that might spend a fair amount of time setting things up correctly, even at this early stage, but it can be a waste of time. If you hit on the edges, you need to abrade a lot because of the chalk. And that, you know, in a way you could say that would be a good thing to do, because since I don't have a lot of width, trying to get the best possible result with every flake early on could be somewhat of a game changer if you were trying to make the biggest point possible or whatever. But I'm not really going to worry about it. I'm just sort of goofing off today. So this is some sort of me time. Got a pretty steep platform here and a little bit of a concavity in there, but we're going to try and just come down on it and hit in there, knowing that we'll hinge it. But I took a flake that ran up to there underneath the hinge, and it'll come off when I hit somewhere else. So, you know, it's still a little bit helpful, even though, see, I mean, I hinged it real big time in there, but it's not diving hinges because I was careful not to put too much pressure on it. Hinged and rolled out into there too, and you're saying, man, you are making some ugly problems. Let's do it again right here. There's another one, and there's another one. So we've got some big ugly hinges there, and you might say, oh, that's terrible. Here's the reason it's not terrible. None of those hinges go down into the center line where a point would be. So they're cosmetic at this point as far as, you know, causing any problems. And we know we're going to come down here anyway and take shots across there. So it just really isn't an issue. Not sure why I did it. I'm just feeling a little controversial. There's another big hinge. So we'll just say, hey, another hinge, because we're hitting on a square end, and you're going to get, well, no, it didn't hinge. You'll tend to get, I'm just going to abrade these sharp edges off so I don't cut my hand. You'll tend to get hinges anytime you hit on a square edge, because what you're doing is, since you can't take a flake off at the normal angles, you got to come in at an angle enough and it kicks up. It starts to come down and kicks up. So we're creating big, ugly problems there. We're going to leave them there. And you might say, why? Well, because one of the reasons I think new nappers, we're going to make another big hinge. I'm going to hit straight in on this. Yep, there's another big hinge. New nappers or new attendees, there's another hinge, at nap-ins in a circle with people with more experience might be concerned about if anybody's noticing what they're doing. I'll make another hinge here. Ah, dang it. Went all the way down there and cut off part of my hinges. That's the problem. It's hard to think in hinging terms. Okay, well, I really got a kick out hinge right there, so good. Trying to make something ugly. when you don't normally try and make stuff ugly. It's more complicated. Ah, look at that hinge. I amuse myself occasionally. All right, so what I ought to do is, just to prove my point, I'm gonna make another hinge here. Oh yeah. I gotta be careful though, that's getting down closer to my point. What do you think? I think I'll post this online. Look, I did some work today on a piece of Georgetown. Looking pretty good, huh? What I was saying is I ought to take this thing to a nap-in. I ought to save it just like it is, take it to a nap-in and put it on my tarp right by my chair. I actually put it on my chair. You know, where is my big abrader? The case of the disappearing abrader. Y'all. How do you lose a full-size abrader? And how long is it? Oh, there it is. My organizational skills are non-existent. Okay, I'm gonna try and do one more hinge here and then I'm gonna quit this goofiness. It rolled out. That doesn't qualify as a really good hinge. Go the other way. That almost ran down and took out my other hinge. Okay. I really need to figure out this camera. Okay, so if I hold it lengthwise, it's the other way. Yeah. All right. Now we're gonna get rid of all this. Are you ready? Let's see, I said I wasn't going to waste a lot of time with the braiding. So I'm gonna hit above the edges, but in order to do that, I'm really gonna have to try and redirect with my support. Because if I made a platform here good and hit along there, I would completely clean that off. So in order not to completely waste it, I'm gonna hold that sucker together and hit kinda forward and make it run a little bit. And I want it up high because I got a big hinge over here. So I'm gonna do that again. So now it's up high. Now hold this together. Hit hard across that hinge and blow off a lot of it. And I've got a real thick area here that would be a great overshot flake along that ridge. But I'm trying to get away without abrading and work quickly. So I'm just gonna scrunch it a little bit with the front end of this bopper. And then I'm gonna hold it together and hope for the best. And that's not a bad result considering. You can see that because I didn't really abrade it, it blew up here, but I didn't let it go anywhere, so I was holding it, and so it went ahead and ran pretty good and did a lot of thinning, which is the issue. You don't wanna really lose an opportunity to do some thinning on something that's this narrow. Okay, so I'm gonna hit above the edge and come right along here. And I caught it a little too thin, and by too thin that means I hit a little too low on it and didn't get enough meat, and I hit it close to where the chalk is. So therefore that edge was pretty weak and kind of failed, and it just sort of didn't do a lot of good. It just came down here sort of wimpy. And that didn't have a lot of force, so it hinged into there, but I'm doing what I want to do, which is raise it to this side. Straight down to raise it even more. Get this all out of the way, flip it. And we're really, this is one of those things where I really, really, really ought to abrade it. And the reason is, if I was to abrade that platform and make that really good, I could hit a huge overshot across here and take off all this stuff. But I'm going to try and hold it together and hit it anyway. So it ended up being, it's the same flake, but it's less dramatic because since I didn't really abrade it, it let go earlier and it didn't get as much done. Holding them together, this stuff's blowing up, but the edges are blowing up, but I'm still getting run because, well, of course I didn't that time, but I'm still getting some run. Okay, so this is sort of a weird deal. You see that little flange and all this sketchiness? Well, wish me luck. It's one of those kind of things where, okay, I should have said something to you. I hit on chalk, which is always sketchy, but I hit hard and I held it all together. And so what I ended up doing is removing a bunch of that square edge with an overshot, even though I was hitting on chalk. But I also was kind of dependent upon this ridge created by the square edge to assist with the run of that. But as you may be able to notice, there's no way you could hit this without this support, because that flake, you know, anytime you got a big concavity to a flake, it's going to break if you're not supporting it, and it'll just die. So we did some good because we sunk that down close to the center line. So we're doing thin in there, and we didn't lose any width or any length really either. I mean, you just lost a tiny little bit of something. So it's really efficient. That's the thing. People say, well, you know, overshots were all accidental, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, because, I mean, it's a better mousetrap in a lot of ways. It's just like the same debate over indirect percussion. Did people really use indirect percussion? Well, if they didn't, they were insane, because indirect percussion is a way better mousetrap in a number of situations. Is it always? No. But it is not by any stretch purely a tool for people who can't hit what they're aiming at with direct. It's not that at all. You know, that may be one benefit of it, but that's certainly not the only benefit. Yeah, I'm messing up. There we go. I was trying to get that strong enough on that end without abrading to hit a straight shot in. And you're saying, oh my gosh, you hinged it. Yes, that was totally intentional. I wanted a straight shot in. I'm trying to thin. This is really ugly, so I don't know what I'm teaching you. Teaching you how to do things in an ugly manner. It's kind of, what I sort of like to show sometimes is what I guess could be considered management by crisis, where I create stuff that some people would consider hugely problematic, and then actually use it in a beneficial way. And one of the easiest ways, when you get kind of where you do have the ability to do pretty well with your napping, one of the easiest ways to try and demo fixing problems and stuff is to nap quote unquote wrong using techniques that are going to create issues that you know would be an issue for a lot of people. And then, so you're helping yourself out with that. I'm going to hit on chalk here. I've got thickness, and I actually have a crack right there, so I don't know what's going to happen with this. And that's really chalk, so this is probably going to blow up. I hit it hard and quickly to overcome the issue of the softness of the chalk. And that crack that was there did let go, and the flake blew up. You can see that the flake blew up early on, but I held it together and made it run. So, oh, there was a big flaw in that stone. There's a big, that looks like a natural thing. I don't think I did that because I hadn't hit near there, so that was just there. I don't know if it's natural, but I don't think I did it. Okay, so this is really sketchy. I got an edge there that doesn't look real sturdy at all right in here. But again, we get an overshot through holding the thing together. We'll see if we can. I'm getting away with an awful lot and looking like better than I thought I would, but I'm just gonna see if I can hit one that goes in there, undercuts that hinge. I don't know what's gonna happen with this crack. I'm gonna go ahead. One of the things I always try and do when I have a problem is remember the very, very basic issues, which in many cases are get weight off the ends. So this end is the thickest, it's real thick, it's got a lot of weight on it. So even though that I've got this crack here, I'd like to get some more. There's a little shell fossil in there too. I'd like to get some of this stuff off before I start undercutting that. But then I need to go ahead and undercut that because it looks like it runs pretty deep. And if it runs as deep as I think it could, it may impact on what I can do. So if I start taking a bunch of stuff off of here, before I know how deep that goes, I may be cutting myself out of the ability to adjust. Hitting down, trying to raise this up so I can flip it. I hear thunder. Got a crack right in there. I'm gonna go ahead and get that off. Well, there it went. There's a crystal pocket in where that deformity was, that crack. There's a little crystal in there, and it also looks like, some of that looks like it was already cracked. So I just lost some of my length, doggone it. But if I can reduce this square edge as much as possible from the sides, then I won't lose more length. Now, I don't know if you can see, but I just barely hit at the top of the chalky cortex. And I hit rapidly in order to try and make the flake go before the edge could collapse. The edge did break and mess up. It did crack right in here, but we still got a big flake. And the main reason for that is I'm holding the edge together. I'm gonna do this again. We're gonna see if I can pull this off. I got an edge that's unabraded and not very good right there. So I'm gonna try and hit that edge, and in spite of that, make it not collapse, well, not stop, and drive a flake over here that takes advantage of this square edge, come over there and do something. So I'm holding it all together, and I've got it supported all the way down to here. Okay, so hopefully you can see, let me figure out which way to move my hand. You can see that my finger pressure all the way along this made it go lower, 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 and even dive more toward the other side. Go ahead and take the other side off, and we've gotten that reduced without losing anything. We've gotten that about half gone. And I mean, I'm hoping that if nothing else, you can see that this is not an accidental tool to be used by novices that make mistakes, that don't know what they're doing, and so it accidentally gets an overshot. The whole concept of interpreting every overshot as accidental is ludicrous to me, because the other thing about that is, with the support with overshots, if you know what you're doing and you know how to support it, yeah, you can either roll off and take off that whole opposite side, or you can just have the shot go straight across and shoot out the opposite side and not take anything extra off. It's not something that isn't controllable. In fact, it's very controllable, because it's very controllable if you have a rock that concoidally fractures. If you have a rock that actually follows the rules of fracture mechanics on a conchoidal fracture, then you can totally control overshots. Now, you may never develop that skill level or that ability, but it is a possible thing to do, is my point. One way to practice that is to take big thick rocks and practice making flat flakes for, you know, to reduce into other tools, to make points out of or whatever. Because the skill set of being able to make perfectly flat flakes anytime you want them is also, see how that blew up but came in flat kind of like I wanted it to? And that blew up, and it's running shorter than I want, but it's coming in flat like I want without any abrading. I don't remember what I was talking about. Oh, the real issue with the see how I'm stretched all out with my support? That's why I'm not worried about it. You know, I'm hitting kind of downward on the end, and you're like, well, isn't that dangerous? No, not really. Not if you do it right. I hit pretty hard on the end right there, and there was no concern. I got a crystal pocket in there that's an issue. I really need to start abrading. This is getting kind of silly. I was just trying to make a point that it's possible to do a lot without abrading, but if I really wanted to continue down that path with this thing, I need to step down to the next size on the, because I'm losing mass, so I need to step down to the next size on the bopper and increase the speed again. Big old crystals. That one kind of lipped off. Georgetown has its own personality, in my opinion. And people that work it a lot sometimes get super good at working it. And I do like the material. I have quite a bit of it. But it does sort of have its own personality, and if you don't work it for a while and work a bunch of other stuff, sometimes you gotta adjust a little bit when you go back to messing with it. I hear thunder. Drop back.